Chapter 9. The Strengthening of Thought Power. We may now proceed to turn our study of thought power to practical account, for study that does not lead to practice is barren. The old declaration still holds good: the end of philosophy is to put an end to pain. We are to learn to develop and then to use our developed thought power to help those around us, the living and the so-called dead, to quicken human evolution and to hasten also our own progress. Thought power can only be increased by steady and persistent exercise. As literally and as truly as muscular development depends on the exercise of the muscles we already possess, so does mental development depend on the exercise of the mind already ours. It is a law of life that growth results from exercise. The life, our self, is ever seeking increased expression outwardly by means of the form in which it is contained. As it is called out by exercise, its pressure on the form causes the form to expand, and fresh matter is laid down in the form, and part of the expansion is thus rendered permanent. When the muscle is stretched by exercise, more life flows into it. The cells multiply, and the muscle thus grows. When the mental body vibrates under the action of thought, fresh matter is drawn in from the mental atmosphere and is built into the body, which thus increases in size as well as in complexity of structure. A mental body continually exercised grows, whether the thought carried on in it be good or evil. The amount of the thought determines the growth of the body. The quality of the thought determines the kind of matter employed in that growth. Now, the cells of the gray matter of the physical brain multiply as the brain is exercised in thinking. Post-mortem examinations have shown that the brain of the thinker is not only larger and heavier than the brain of the plowman, but also that it has a very much larger number of convolutions. These afford a much increased surface for the gray nervous matter, which is the immediate physical instrument of thought. Thus both the mental body and the physical brain grow by exercise, and those who would improve and enlarge them must have recourse to regular daily thinking, with the deliberately chosen object of improving their mental capacities. Needless to add that the inherent powers of the knower are also evolved more rapidly by this exercise, and ever play upon the vehicles with increasing force. In order that it may have its full effect, this practice should be methodical. Let a man choose an able book on some subject which is attractive to him, a book written by a competent author containing fresh, strong thought. A sentence or a few sentences should be read slowly, and then the reader should think closely and intently over what he has read. It is a good rule to think twice as long as one reads, for the object of the reading is not simply to acquire new ideas, but to strengthen the thinking faculties. Half an hour should be given to this practice if possible, but the student may begin with a quarter of an hour, as he will find the close attention a little exhausting at first. Any person who takes up this practice and follows it regularly for a few months will at the end of that time be conscious of a distinct growth of mental strength, and he will find himself able to deal with the ordinary problems of life far more effectively than heretofore. Nature is a just pay-mistress, giving to each exactly the wages he has earned, but not an unearned farthing. Those who would have the wages of increased faculty must earn them by hard thinking. The work is twofold, as has been already pointed out. On the one side, the powers of consciousness are drawn out. On the other, the forms through which it is expressed are developed. And the first of these must never be forgotten. Many people recognize the value of definite thinking as affecting the brain, but forget that the source of all thought is the unborn, undying self, and that they are only drawing out what they already possess. Within them is all power, and they have only to utilize it, For the divine self is the root of the life of each, and the aspect of the self which is knowledge lives in everyone and is ever seeking opportunity for his own fuller expression. The power is within each, uncreate, eternal. The form is molded and changed, but the life is the man's self, illimitable in his powers. That power within each is the same power as shaped the universe. It is divine, not human, a portion of the life of the Logos, and inseparate from him. If this were realized, and if the student remembered that it is not the scantiness of the power, but the inadequacy of the instrument that makes the difficulty, he would often work with more courage and hope, and therefore with more efficiency. Let him feel that his essential nature is knowledge, and that it lies with him how far that essential nature shall find expression in this incarnation. Expression is, indeed, limited by the thinkings of the past, but can be now increased and made more efficient by the same power which in that past shaped the present. Forms are plastic and can be remolded, slowly, it is true, by the vibrations of the life. Above all, let the student remember that for steady growth, regularity of practice is essential. When a day's practice is omitted, 3 or 4 days' work are necessary to counterbalance the slipping back, at least during the earlier stages of growth. When the habit of steady thought is acquired, then the regularity of practice is less important. But until this habit is definitely established, regularity is of the utmost moment, for the old habit of loose drifting reasserts itself, and the matter of the mental body falls back into its old shapes, and has to be again shaken out of them on the resumption of the practice. Better 5 minutes of work done regularly than half an hour on some days and none on others. Worry, its meaning and eradication. It has been said truly enough that people age more by worry than by work. Work, unless excessive, does not injure the thought apparatus, but, on the contrary, strengthens it. But the mental process known as worry definitely injures it, and after a time produces a nervous exhaustion and irritability which render steady mental work impossible. What is worry? It is the process of repeating the same train of thought over and over again, with small alterations, coming to no result, and not even aiming at the reaching of a result. It is the continued reproduction of thought forms, initiated by the mental body and the brain, not by the consciousness, and imposed by them on the consciousness. As overtired muscles cannot keep still, but move restlessly even against the will, so do the tired mental body and brain repeat over and over again the very vibrations that have wearied them, and the thinker vainly tries to still them and thus obtain rest. Once more automatism is seen, the tendency to move in the direction in which movement has already been made. The thinker has dwelt on a painful subject, and has endeavored to reach a definite and useful conclusion. He has failed and ceases to think, but remains unsatisfied, wishing to find a solution, and dominated by the fear of the anticipated trouble. This fear keeps him in an anxious and restless condition, causing an irregular outflow of energy. Then the mental body and brain, under the impulse of this energy and of the wish, but undirected by the thinker, continue to move and throw up the images already shaped and rejected. These are, as it were, forced on his attention, and the sequence recurs again and again. As weariness increases, irritability is set up, and reacts again on the wearied forms, and so action and reaction continue in a vicious circle. The thinker is, in worry, the slave of his servant bodies, and is suffering under their tyranny. Now, this very automatism of the mental body and brain, this tendency to repeat vibrations already produced, may be used to correct the useless repetition of thoughts that cause pain. When a thought current has made for itself a channel, a thought form, new thought currents tend to flow along the same track, that being the line of least resistance. A thought that causes pain readily thus recurs by the fascination of fear, as a thought that gives pleasure recurs by the fascination of love. The object of fear, the picture of what will happen when anticipation becomes reality, makes thus a mind channel, a mold for thought, and a brain track also. The tendency of the mental body and the brain, released from immediate work, is to repeat the form, and to let unemployed energy flow into the channel already made. Perhaps the best way to get rid of a worry channel is to dig another of an exactly opposite character. Such a channel is, as we have already seen, made by definite, persistent, regular thought. Let, then, a person who is suffering from worry give 3 or 4 minutes in the morning, on first rising, to some noble and encouraging thought. The self is peace, that self am I. The self is strength, that self am I. Let him think how, in his innermost nature, he is one with the Supreme Father, how in that nature he is undying, unchanging, fearless, free, serene, strong, how he is clothed in perishable vestures that feel the sting of pain, the gnawing of anxiety, how he mistakenly regards these as himself. As he thus broods, the peace will enfold him, and he will feel it is his own, his natural atmosphere. As he does this, day by day, the thought will dig its own channel in mental body and in brain, and ere long, when the mind is loosed from labor, the thought of the self that is peace and strength will present itself, unbidden, and fold its wings around the mind in the very turmoil of the world. Mental energy will flow naturally into this channel, and worry will be of the past. Another way is to train the mind to rest on the good law, thus establishing a habit of content. Here the man dwells on the thought that all circumstances work within the law, and that naught happens by chance. Only that which the law brings to us can reach us, by whatever hand it may outwardly come. Nothing can injure us that is not our due, brought to us by our own previous willing and acting. None can wrong us, save as an instrument of the law, collecting a debt due from us. Even if an anticipation of pain or trouble come to the mind, it will do well to face it calmly, accept it, agree to it. Most of the sting disappears when we acquiesce in the finding of the law, whatever it may be. And we may do this the more easily if we remember that the law works ever to free us, by exacting the debts that keep us in prison, and though it bring us pain, the pain is but the way to happiness. All pain, come it how it may, works for our ultimate bliss, and is but breaking the bonds which keep us tied to the whirling wheel of births and deaths. When these thoughts have become habitual, the mind ceases to worry, for the claws of worry can find no hold on that strong panoply of peace. Thinking and ceasing to think. Much gain of strength may be made by learning both to think and to cease thinking at will. While we are thinking, we should throw our whole mind into the thought, and think our best. But when the work of thought is over, it should be dropped completely, and not allowed to drift on vaguely, touching the mind and leaving it, like a boat knocking itself against a rock. A man does not keep a machine running when it is not turning out work, needlessly wearing the machinery. But the priceless machinery of the mind is allowed to turn and turn aimlessly, wearing itself out without useful result. To learn to cease thinking, to let the mind rest, is an acquisition of the greatest value. As the tired limbs luxuriate when stretched in repose, so may the tired mind find comfort in complete rest. Constant thinking means constant vibration. Constant vibration means constant waste. Exhaustion and premature decay result from this useless expenditure of energy, and a man may preserve both mental body and brain longer by learning to cease thinking when thought is not being directed to useful result. It is true that ceasing to think is by no means an easy achievement. Perhaps it is even more difficult than thinking. It must be practiced for very brief periods until the habit is established, for it means at first an expenditure of force in holding the mind still. Let the student, when he has been thinking steadily, drop the thought, and as any thought appears in the mind, turn the attention away from it. Persistently turn away from each intruder. If need be, imagine a void as a step to quiescence, and try to be conscious only of stillness and darkness. Practice on these lines will become more and more intelligible if persisted in, and a sense of quiet and peace will encourage the student to persist. Nor should it be forgotten that the cessation of thought busied in outward activities is a necessary preliminary to work on the higher planes. When the brain has learned to be quiescent, when it no longer restlessly throws up the broken images of past activities, then the possibility opens of the withdrawal of the consciousness from its physical vesture and of its free activity in its own world. Those who hope to take this forward step within the present life must learn to cease thinking, for only when the modifications of the thinking principle are checked on the lower plane can freedom on the higher be obtained. Another way of giving the rest to the mental body and the brain, a far easier way than the cessation of thinking, is by change of thought. A man who thinks strenuously and persistently along one line should have a second line of thought, as different as possible from the first, to which he can turn his mind for refreshment. The extraordinary freshness and youthfulness of thought which characterized William Ewart Gladstone in his old age was largely the result of the subsidiary intellectual activities of his life. His strongest and most persistent thought went to politics, but his studies in theology and in Greek filled many a leisure hour. Truly, he was but an indifferent theologian, and what he was as a Greek scholar I am not competent to say, but though the world cannot be said to be much the richer for his theological pronouncements, his own brain was kept fresh and receptive by these and his Grecian studies. Charles Darwin, on the other hand, lamented in his old age that he had allowed those of his faculties to atrophy by disuse that would have been concerned with subjects outside his own specialized work. Literature and art for him had no attraction, and he keenly felt the limitations he had imposed on himself by his overabsorption in one line of study. A man needs change of exercise in thought as well as in body, else he may suffer from mental cramp, as do some from writer's cramp. Especially, perhaps, is it important for men engaged in absorbing worldly pursuits that they should take up a subject which engages faculties of the mind not evolved in business activities, related to art, science, or literature, in which they may find mental recreation and polish. Above all, the young should adopt some such pursuit, ere yet their fresh and active brains grow jaded and weary, and in age they will then find within themselves resources which will enrich and brighten their declining days. The form will preserve its elasticity for a much longer period of time when it is thus given rest by change of occupation. The secret of peace of mind. Much of that which we have already studied tells us something of the way in which peace of mind may be ensured. But its fundamental necessity is the clear recognition and realization of our place in the universe. We are part of one great life, which knows no failure, no loss of effort or strength, which, mightily and sweetly ordering all things, bears the worlds onwards to their goal. The notion that our little life is a separate independent unit, fighting for its own hand against countless separate independent units, is a delusion of the most tormenting kind. So long as we thus see the world and life, peace broods far off on an inaccessible pinnacle. When we feel and know that all selves are one, then peace of mind is ours without any fear of loss. All our troubles arise from thinking of ourselves as separated units, and then revolving on our own mental axes, thinking only of our separate interests, our separate aims, our separate joys and sorrows. Some do this as regards the lower things of life, and they are the most dissatisfied of all, ever restlessly snatching at the general stock of material goods and piling up useless treasures. Others seek ever their own separate progress in the higher life, good earnest people, but ever discontented and anxious. They are ever contemplating and analyzing themselves. Am I getting on? Do I know more than I did last year? And so on. Fretting for continual assurances of progress, their thoughts centered on their own inner gain. Peace is not to be found in the continual seeking for the gratification of the separated self, even though the gratification be of the higher kind. It is found in renouncing the separated self, in resting on the self that is one, the self that is manifesting at every stage of evolution, and in our stage as much as in every other, and is content in all. Desire for spiritual progress is of great value so long as the lower desires entangle and fetter the aspirant. He gains strength to free himself from them by the passionate longing for spiritual growth. But it does not, it cannot give happiness, which is only found when the separate self is cast away and the great self is recognized as that for the sake of which we are living in the world. Even in ordinary life the unselfish people are the happiest, those who work to make others happy and who forget themselves. The dissatisfied people are those who are ever seeking happiness for themselves. We are the self, and therefore the joys and the sorrows of others are ours as much as theirs, and in proportion as we feel this, and learn to live so that the whole world shares the life that flows through us, do our minds learn the secret of peace. He attaineth peace, into whom all desires flow, as rivers flow into the ocean, which is filled with water, but remaineth unmoved, not he who desireth desire. Bhagavad Gita. The more we desire, the more the craving for happiness, which is unhappiness, must grow. The secret of peace is the knowledge of the self, and the thought, that self am I, will help towards the gaining of a peace of mind that nothing can disturb. Chapter 10. Helping Others by Thought. Most valuable of all the gains made by the worker for thought power is the increased ability to help those around him, those weaker ones who have not yet learned to utilize their own powers. With his own mind and heart at peace, he is fitted to help others. A mere kind thought is helpful in its measure, but the student will wish to do far more than drop a mere crumb to the starving. Let us take first the case of a man who is under the sway of an evil habit, such as drink, and whom a student wishes to help. He should first ascertain, if possible, at what hours the patient's mind is likely to be unemployed, such as his hour for going to bed. If the man should be asleep, it would be all the better. At such time he should sit down alone and picture the image of his patient as vividly as he can, seated in front of him. Picture him clearly and in detail, so that he may see the image as he would see the man. This very clear picturing is not essential, although the process is thereby rendered more effective. Then he should fix his attention on this image, and address to it, with all the concentration of which he is capable, the thoughts, one by one and slowly, which he wishes to impress on his patient's mind. He should present them as clear mental images, just as he would do if laying arguments before him in words. In the case taken, he might place before him vivid pictures of the disease and misery entailed by the drink habit, the nervous breakdown, the inevitable end. If the patient is asleep, he will be drawn to the person thus thinking of him, and will animate the image of himself that has been formed. Success depends on the concentration and the steadiness of the thought directed to the patient, and just in proportion to the development of the thought power will be its effect. Care must be taken in such a case not to try to control in any way the patient's will. The effort should be wholly directed towards placing before his mind the ideas which, appealing to his intelligence and emotions, may stimulate him to come to a right judgment, and to make an effort to carry it out in action. If an attempt is made to impose on him a particular line of conduct, and the attempt succeed, even then little has been gained. The mental tendency towards vicious self-indulgence will not be changed by opposing an obstacle in the way of indulging in a particular form of it. Checked in one direction, it will find another, and a new vice will supplant the old. A man forcibly constrained to temperance by the domination of his will is no more cured of the vice than if he were locked up in prison. Apart from this, no man should try to impose his will on another, even in order to make him do right. Growth is not helped by such external coercion. The intelligence must be convinced, the emotion aroused and purified, else no real gain is made. If the student wishes to give any other kind of thought help, he should proceed in the same way, picturing his friend and clearly presenting the ideas he wishes to convey. A strong wish for his good, sent to him as a general protective agency, will remain about him as a thought form for a time proportionate to the strength of the thought, and will guard him against evil, acting as a barrier against hostile thoughts, and even warding off physical dangers. A thought of peace and consolation, similarly sent, will soothe and calm the mind, spreading around its object an atmosphere of calm. The aid which is often rendered to another by prayer is largely of the character described above, the frequent effectiveness of prayer over ordinary good wishes being due to the greater concentration and intensity thrown by the pious believer into his prayer. Similar concentration and intensity would bring about similar results without the use of prayer. There is, of course, another way in which prayer is sometimes effective. It calls the attention of some superhuman or evolved human intelligence to the person for whom it is offered, and direct aid may then be rendered to him by a power surpassing that of the offerer of the prayer. Perhaps it is as well here to interject the remark that the half-instructed theosophist should not take alarm, and refrain from giving to a friend any thought assistance of which he is capable, by the fear lest he should be interfering with karma. Let him leave karma to take care of itself, and have no more fear of interfering with it than of interfering with the law of gravitation. If he can help his friend, let him do so fearlessly, confident in the fact that, if he can do so, that help is within his friend's karma, and that he is himself the happy agent of the law. Helping the so-called dead. All that we can do for the living by thought, we can do even more easily for those who have gone in front of us through death's gateway, for in their case there is no heavy physical matter to be set vibrating ere the thought can reach the waking consciousness. After death is passed through, the tendency of the man is to turn his attention inwards, and to live in the mind rather than in an external world. The thought currents that used to rush outwards, seeking the external world through the sense organs, now find themselves blocked by an emptiness, caused by the disappearance of their instruments. It is as though a man, rushing towards an accustomed bridge over a ravine, suddenly found himself stopped by the bridgeless gulf, the bridge having vanished. The rearrangement of the astral body that quickly follows on the loss of the physical body further tends to shut in the mental energies, to prevent their outer expression. The astral matter, if not disturbed by any action of those left behind on earth, forms an enclosing shell instead of a plastic instrument, and the higher and purer the earth life that has ended, the more complete is the barrier against impressions from without, or emergence from within. But the person thus checked as to his outward going energies is all the more receptive of influences from the mental world, and he can therefore be helped, cheered, and counseled far more effectively than when he was on earth. In the world into which those freed from the physical body have gone, a loving thought is as palpable to the senses as is here a loving word or tender caress. Everyone who passes over should therefore be followed by thoughts of love and peace, by aspirations for his swift passage onwards through the valleys of death to the bright land beyond. Only too many remain in the intermediate state longer than they otherwise would, because it is their bad karma not to have friends who know how to help them from this side of death. And if people on earth knew how much of comfort and of happiness is experienced by the wayfarers to the heavenly worlds from these truly angelic messengers, these thoughts of love and cheer, if they knew the force they had to strengthen and console, none would be left lonely by those who remain behind. The beloved dead have surely a claim on our love and care, and even apart from this, how great is the consolation to the heart bereaved of the presence that gave sunshine to life, to be able still to serve the loved one and surround him on his way by the guardian angels of thought. The occultists who founded the great religions were not unmindful of this service due from those left on earth to those who had passed onwards. The Hindu has his Shraddha, by which he helps on their way the souls that have passed into the next world, quickening their passage into Svarga. The Christian churches have masses and prayers for the dead. Grant him, O Lord, eternal peace, and let light perpetual shine on him, prays the Christian for his friend in the other world. Only the Protestant section of Christians have lost this gracious custom, with so much else that pertains to the higher life of the Christian man. May knowledge soon restore to them the useful and helpful practice of which ignorance has robbed them. Thought work out of the body. We need not confine our thought activities to the hours which we spend in the physical body, for very much effective work may be done by thought when our bodies are lying peacefully asleep. The process of going to sleep is simply the withdrawal of the consciousness, clad in its subtle bodies, from the physical body which is left wrapped in sleep, while the man himself passes into the astral world. Freed from the physical body, he is much more powerful as regards the effects he can produce by his thought, but for the most part he does not send it outwards, but uses it within himself on subjects that interest him in his waking life. His thought energies run into accustomed molds, and work on the problems that his waking consciousness is busy in solving. The proverb that "the night brings counsel," the advice when an important decision is to be made to sleep on it before deciding, are vague intuitions of this fact of mental activity during the hours of slumber. Without any deliberate attempt to utilize the freed intelligence, men gather and harvest the fruit of its labor. Those, however, who seek to steer their evolution instead of allowing it to drift, should consciously avail themselves of the greater powers they can exercise when unimpeded by the weight of the body. The way to do this is simple. Any problem needing solution should be quietly held in the mind when going to sleep. It must not be debated on, argued over, or sleep will be prevented, but, as it were, simply stated and left. This is sufficient to give the required direction to thought, and the thinker will take it up and deal with it when freed from the physical body. The solution will generally be in the mind on waking, i.e., the thinker will have impressed it on the brain, and it is a good plan to keep paper and pencil by the bed to note down the solution immediately on waking, as a thought thus obtained is very rapidly erased by the thronging stimuli from the physical world and is not easily recovered. Many a difficulty in life may be seen clearly in this way, and a tangled path rendered open. And many a mental problem may also find its solution when submitted to the intelligence unweighted by the dense brain. Much in the same way may a student help during the hours of sleep any friend in this world or in the next. He must picture his friend in his mind, and determine to find and help him. That mental image will draw him and his friend together, and they will communicate with each other in the astral world. But in any case in which any emotion is aroused by the thought of the friend, as in the case of one who has passed on, the student must seek to calm it ere going to sleep. For emotion causes a swirl in the astral body, and if that body be in a state of strong agitation, it isolates the consciousness, and makes it impossible for mental vibrations to pass outwards. In some cases of such communication in the astral world, a dream may remain in the waking memory, while in others no trace may appear. The dream is the record, often confused and mixed with alien vibrations, of the meeting out of the body, and should be so regarded. But if no trace appear in the brain, it does not matter, since the activities of the freed intelligence are not hindered by the ignorance of the brain that does not share them. A man's usefulness in the astral world is not governed by the memories imprinted on the brain by the returning consciousness, and these memories may be entirely absent, while most beneficent work is occupying the hours of the body's sleep. Another form of thought work that is little remembered, and that can be done either in or out of the physical body, is the helping of good causes, of public movements beneficial to mankind. To think of these in a definite way is to start currents of aid from the inner planes of being, and we may especially consider this in relation to the power of combined thought. The increased force that may be obtained by the union of several people to help a common object is recognized not only by occultists, but by all who know anything of the deeper science of the mind. It is the custom, in some parts at least of Christendom, to preface the sending of a mission to evangelize some special district by definite and sustained thinking. A small band of Roman Catholics, for instance, will meet together for some weeks or months before a mission is sent out, and will prepare the ground where it is to work by imaging the place, thinking of themselves as present there, and then intently meditating on some definite dogma of the Church. In this way a thought atmosphere is created in that district most favorable to the spread of Roman Catholic teachings, and receptive brains are prepared to wish to receive instruction in them. The thought work will be aided by the added intensity given to it by fervent prayer, another form of thought work, fired by religious fervor. The contemplative orders of the Roman Catholic Church do a large amount of good and useful work by thought, as do the recluses of the Hindu and Buddhist faiths. Wherever a good and pure intelligence sets itself to work to aid the world by diffusing through it noble and lofty thoughts, there definite service is done to man, and the lonely thinker becomes one of the lifters of the world. A group of like-minded thinkers, such as a group of theosophists, may do much to spread theosophical ideas in their own neighborhood by agreeing to give a fixed 10 minutes a day to thinking on a theosophical teaching. It is not necessary that their bodies should be gathered in one place, provided that their minds are together. Suppose such a group decided to think about reincarnation daily for 10 minutes at a fixed time for 3 or 6 months. Powerful thought forms would then throng the selected district, and the idea of reincarnation would come into a considerable number of minds. Enquiries would be made, books on the subject would be sought for, and a lecture on the subject, after such a preparation, would attract an eager and interested audience. Progress, out of all proportion to the physical agencies employed, is made where earnest men and women combine in this mental propaganda. Afterword. Thus we may learn to utilize these great forces that lie within us all, and to utilize them to the best possible effect. As we use them they will grow, until with surprise and delight we shall find how great a power of service we possess. Let it be remembered that we are continually using these powers, unconsciously, spasmodically, feebly, affecting ever for good or ill all who surround our path in life. It is here sought to induce the reader to use these same forces, consciously, steadily, and strongly. We cannot help thinking to some extent, however weak may be the thought currents we generate. We must affect those around us, whether we will or not. The only question we have to decide is whether we will do it beneficially or mischievously, feebly or strongly, driftingly or of set purpose. We cannot help the thoughts of others touching our minds. We can only choose which we will receive, which reject. We must affect and be affected, but we may affect others for their benefit or their injury. We may be affected by the good or by the evil. Here lies our choice, a choice momentous for ourselves and for the world. Choose well, for your choice is brief and yet endless. Peace to all beings. End of Thought Power, Its Control and Culture by Annie Besant.